want to go to visit Vietnam, it's time to do it.
Okay.
We still do the quarantine and the testing, but anyway, we're opening up. Yeah.
Okay. Want to make sure everything's okay for. Originally, I was going to do a stream. I'm still trying to do it, but I gotta pre-record it just in case if the
Mm.
stream doesn't work. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because of internet connection, Puerto Rico is not the best.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I really want to know what's going on in Puerto Rico, like, lately.
Yeah, but before we can do that, for people who are new to the stream or the video, whatever depends the situation right now. Do you want to introduce yourself for the people who don't know about you?
Hi everybody, I'm Luna. I have my channel named Luna Ơi on YouTube. I am a Vietnamese communist born and living here my whole life. I'm in my channel. I usually I have traveling vlogs where I travel in Vietnam and I make videos. I also teach how to cook Vietnamese food, and of course I talk about political stuff too. So mostly like the history of Vietnam, to raise the awareness of people outside of Vietnam about the Vietnam War and our path to socialism and how Vietnam looks like today. So nice to meet y'all.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's been a while. I haven't seen you in person for some time. And since the last time we met, a lot of things happened on the island.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you don't know much about Puerto Rico, to give a good introduction, not only for you, but for everybody on the stream, like all three people, assuming, Puerto Rico is a U.S. colony, right? I think that is, everybody agrees with that. There's not a dispute. There
Yes.
is no debate about that, unless you are the pro-statehood Puerto Ricans who, for some reason, still think that we are somehow not colony.
Yeah.
Yeah. And interesting fact, not only we are also a colony, but by law, according to the Supreme Court, thanks to what is called the Jones Act of 1918, which what they gave us U.S. citizenship. Even though it says U.S. citizenship, if you actually read the paper, we are actually second-class citizens according to
Ah,
U.S. law. So, if you don't know what that means, or I don't know, it happened the same for you in Vietnam when it was under French colonial rule, when
yes.
they gave you French citizenship, but you're not allowed to vote or anything in that sort. I don't know if that happened in Vietnam. So forgive me for my ignorance.
It's not exactly the same. They didn't even treat us like human. So we definitely like the second class, third class, fourth class citizens. And we yeah, they treated us as slaves. It was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah. And in Puerto Rico, they also treated us as basically animals. At one point, at least like in the early history from 1898, when that's where we became a U.S. colony, because before that it was Spaniard. They're from the Spanish Empire. They treated us like we were still living in the jungle. And if you learn the early history of the island, how they treat, if you read like old newspapers and academic literature at the time, they treated Puerto Rico as like the Amazon forest. Like we need to civilize the savage, este Puerto Rican. They used to call it like that, not Puerto Rican, Puerto Rican. That was a slur back then.
Gosh. Yeesh.
Yeah, and and just in case if you have any questions about imperialism on the island, like specific topics, I try my best to answer if you have any at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Este,
Sure.
but yeah, for if you don't know, like we're still technically second class citizens. So, and the last time we met, many things have happened. Like for
Yeah.
example, they recently privatized electricity in the island.
Wow.
Yes, they recently,
So how much is the electricity price now over there?
uh, depending where you live, but usually over $200 or more the
No.
a month.
Jeez.
Which is very
That's
expensive
a
for us
lot.
Puerto Ricans. because
That's a lot.
yeah, and it's even worse.
In
Sorry, continue.
oh yeah. I just say about the electricity. A few years ago, a lot of Vietnamese capitalists and liberals also pushed the government hard on like privatizing the electricity. And luckily that the government's like pushed hard against that. So until now, water, electricity, and gasoline, they all still like state-owned product of Vietnam, and the government subsidize the price. I'm not saying that there is corruption in, for example, in the electricity like state-owned company. Is absolutely there's corruption, but it's still better than just like privatize the shit out of the whole like electricity system like that. So I'm still thankful that electricity, water, and gasoline still state owned, all state owned in Vietnam.
Yeah, este, and other things that happened since the last time we talked. Este, at least the good news, at least for me, what I'm noticing under analyzing the material conditions in Puerto Rico, that at least on the good side of things, leftism is on the rise again. That we haven't
Oh,
seen something like that since, depending who you ask, since the 70s, give or take. And I don't know in Vietnam, the word nationalism, is it naturally considered a right wing or a left wing thing in Vietnam?
it's a left wing in Vietnam.
Okay, and
Mm.
in Puerto Rico, it's the same. If you call yourself in Puerto Rico a nationalist, or in our terms, nacionalista, it was basically a fancy way of saying you're a Marxist back then,
Mm.
you know.
Yes, same here. Yes, yes.
And even to this day, if you are very open about your Puerto Rican nationalism, right? There's a good likelihood the FBI is watching you. Like even to this day, este, because my family, especially from my grandmother's side of the family, like my grandmother's side of the family, este, they don't have a good relation with the FBI. Let's say that. Uh, I remember watching your videos that you talk about one of your family members. I can't remember which one, who was in the communist party, like military, who fought against the Americans. Who was?
Yeah, that's my grandpa, father, my dad. He was the communist soldier. He was an NLF, National Liberation Front, and he died in the South in 1968 during Tet Offensive.
Yeah, I remember watching that video. The bravery your dad did for the liberation of the people of Vietnam, and that something similar happened to my family. My great grandfather, who was part of the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico, este, like I said back then, if you're part of the Nationalist Party, there's a good likelihood you're gonna be in trouble with the FBI. So
Mm.
yeah, he got the first taste of the FBI brutality.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow.
they didn't do anything like physically harm, right? They didn't do that to him. Although there was a good likelihood that he could be killed by the FBI at any moment, right? Because in back in the 40s, 1940s, 1930s, this time period of history, the United States made a law. It's called the gag law, or la ley 53, right? That it was illegal to own a Puerto Rican flag.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it was illegal back then. And it was also illegal to sing the national anthem of Puerto Rico as well. And
You're trying so hard to erase your nationality, huh?
that is correct. At one point, when my grandma grew up in school, right? This is during the final years of the Americanization program in Puerto Rico. In school, it was illegal to teach Spanish in school as well.
Wow.
And the
So
punishment,
they banned Spanish too. What the hell?
yeah, It was the punishment was 10 years in prison. Yeah, and
It's crazy. You know that like they also banned the Hawaiian language, and
yeah,
yeah, like Silver spoke. He also like he grew up without studying his own language, and he had to like restudy. Like now, it's disgusting.
yeah. I can relate with Silver. We actually talked about this before. Este,
Oh,
and it's been a while. I haven't talked to it for a while, but like the last time we talked, it was about that, and it happened to me because I grew up learning English, right? Even
yeah.
though Spanish was now legal, they legalized the
Mm,
teaching in 1998. But
mm. Wow,
because I
very
went to
recent.
because I went to private school, the private school still prioritized the Americanization program. So they
I
teach you
see.
everything in English.
Yeah, I see.
And my great grandfather, sorry, when he was still alive, because like I said, he was part of the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico. He used to secretly have the Puerto Rican flag in his house. But every time there's a cop coming to visit him, he had to hide everything, like hide the
Uh,
flag, hide, the
mm,
textbooks, like communist textbooks, because he actually owned communist textbooks back then.
yeah.
I actually have one of his
Wow.
copies. I actually have this one. I have it right here.
Nice.
My great grandpa's old communist book.
Awesome.
Yeah, uh,
What's that book about? What's that book about?
it's called the National Question. It's about not the Communist Party, but like the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico and the proletarian movement from 1930 to 40.
I
And
see.
the funny part, like, I got the impression like my great grandpa is not a communist. Literally, like the third page opens up with a quote from Lenin. So I'm like, okay, forget what I said. you know.
It's not coincidence that like Marxism Leninism is very strong. Always have been very strong in the non-white sphere. You know,
That is
it's this
correct.
ideology that for like non-white people, oppressed people.
Yeah, that is very true. Especially like as a Puerto Rican, like you said yourself, like Marxism, Leninism, or any version of communist philosophy has been very popular of people of the third world. But there's also like a pattern that if you're Puerto Rican, but in addition to that, if you're Afro Puerto Rican, which means Black Puerto Rican or African Puerto Rican,
Yeah.
depending the terminology you want to use, right? They tend more of the more radical compared to the white Puerto Ricans. That doesn't mean the word
Mm,
radical because in our perspective, in our understanding of identity, we are consider ourselves as indigenous, as natives,
mm.
right? And
Yes.
Americans had treated us how they treated the Native Americans.
Yes.
So there is a heavy discrimination, and I hear many horror stories, from my grandpa, my grandmother, and their parents, right? FBI under their surveillance, possibly being killed by the FBI agents. The discrimination when they went to New York because there was how do you call this in English? A mass migration, and during the Great Depression, and my grandpa was there. And the funny part, my grandfather, like not my great grandfather, my grandfather, a different person, he almost got in trouble with the FBI by accident because his neighbor, of all people, his neighbor was the leader of the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico, Pedro Abisu Campos. And and because of that, just be a neighbor was enough for the FBI. It's like if you do anything stupid, we are legally allowed to kill you.
Wow. Ah, it's depressing.
It is, and Puerto Rico history is is depressing for the most part, especially when American comes in. You know,
I mean, this is like look at Puerto Rico and look at Vietnam. It's the thing is that like this is the thing if like because Vietnam won the Vietnam War. That is why I am living here, having my own country to our own people. And you, because you've been illegally occupied and like invaded by the USA even to this day, and now your people have been treated like second-class citizens, and everything is so horrible. It's just saying that even though I was born in extreme poverty in the 90s of Vietnam, when Vietnam was still under the US sanction, but I never faced, this is the truth, I never faced any racism growing up, like at all. I learned Vietnamese, I learned our own history, and I learned about our own culture, and I'm proud of it. And I never have to face any racism my whole childhood growing up. First time I had to face racism was when I started my YouTube channel, and I went to, you know, online. I went online and meet like, white racist people on the internet. It is like, yeah, my grandpa and generation of my grandpa died. I can live in this country, and I'd rather be born in Vietnam, even though I was born in extreme poverty, than be born in a rich country and being treated like shit.
Yeah, it no, it's Puerto Ricans we have received so much discrimination, and it's even worse because I don't know much about cinema when it comes to the depiction of Vietnamese people, right? Because in American movies they always use racist stereotypes, right? They always portray
Yeah,
in a very inoffensive, inaccurate manner, and for some reason they always put white people as the main Asian characters for some reason, despite do not look closely as Asian. I don't know if you have noticed some movies they try to do that.
yes,
Este,
they did. Yeah.
in Puerto Rico, our depiction, like how they depicted us in the cinema, in the mainstream consciousness, right, was in the movie called West Side Story. This is in the 60s. This was the first mainstream movie, right? Big,
Mm.
big budget. Like today Marvel, and it was a big cast. As the
Uh-huh.
when they put the Puerto Ricans like as the main focus, right?
Mm.
And they use literally every stereotype in the book. And when I mean every stereotype, I'm talking about the first 3 minutes of the introduction of the Puerto Ricans. Like, because they depict us usually as either gang members, like we're always
Mm.
criminals trying to do horrific stuff, and the Puerto
Oh my
Rican
gosh.
woman, is portrayed as the, how do you say this in English, like sleep around with many white men and destroy white
Mm.
man's marriage. There's a term for that, but I don't know what it is called, right?
My gosh.
And another stereotype, but this can apply to every Latino, like Latin American in general.
Mm.
But
Mm.
it's like they have a lot of kids as well. It's the because it's a stereotype of the welfare system. Oh, you have a lot of kids because of welfare. Yeah, like you're not a very useful person, so to speak. Even though taking care of children is a job in and of itself, so sexism is another factor as well.
Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, a movie about the Vietnam War with Vietnamese in it. We usually like there are a few stereotypes of Vietnamese too. About Viet Cong, they always painted us in the Hollywood Vietnam War movies like we were like a bunch of barbaric. So for
Yeah.
example, in a scene, I know exactly what movie is that, but in a scene that was like Vietnamese Viet Cong, the Viet Cong shot down a US airplane, you know? And
Uh
in
huh.
the movie, after we shot that airplane down, we just like scream and, like celebrate. It's like a bunch of like, people in the jungle, and then we left.
Yeah.
This is totally inaccurate because Vietnamese will never leave an airplane like that. We gonna just like loot the shit out of it because at that time it was so poor, and we're gonna just take everything that belonged to that aircraft and turn it into our stuff. So it is like totally they treated us as a bunch of brainless. kind of animals, a berry, something like that. It's very disgusting and insulting. And also they paint Vietnamese women, like prostitutes, and like like that we were forced to be that.
Yeah.
They act like we loved it, and like we worship white men, and then like it's yeah, they paint us. It's just pure like sex object. It's disgusting. It's really disgusting. And that is why like Vietnam, Hollywood movies about Vietnam wars in Vietnam, they are not really famous like at all, because it's so wrong and it's so insulting to Vietnamese people.
Yeah, I saw many movies depicting Vietnam because usually from the American perspective, right? Like the main characters are
Mm.
American. It's even worse
Mm-hmm.
in video games. I don't know if you
Gosh.
played Call of Duty. I
Oh,
like
I don't play, but I know about it. Yes.
yeah, and many video games, especially first-person shooter. Like this is in this
Mm.
specific genre, right? In this area of video games, where you play as American or British, rarely, but like usually American, trying to fight the evil Vietnamese people who are hiding in basically caveman style, like in caves and tunnels, and they trying to portray it as like for some reason like ninjas, like modern day ninjas. It's very, there is a very racist depiction, right?
Exactly.
They never explain why they are fighting you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because in the very, at least for me, in the very least in World War II games where you're fighting Nazis, we all know they're the bad guys, right?
Exactly.
But in Vietnam, they never explain why they're the bad guy. You just assume they're bad because you're an American soldier, right? At least in World War
Yes.
II games, they actually depict why the Nazis are bad to begin with. It's not that hard to do it, but like at least they try, you know. And and this is another problem as us Puerto Ricans, because now we're talking about like the military, like the Vietnam War. We're talking about in the military in Puerto Rico. Forgive me. Sorry. I was about to say. In the military, Puerto Ricans, for the longest time and still to some degree, are segregated. They separate you between other race of people. Back then, if you cannot speak English, right? If you want to join the military, right?
Mm.
But this is now if you want to join. Back then, you were forced to go to the military. You have no choice. You were forced to go there once you turn 18. Este, and if you don't know how to speak English, they put you with the black soldiers in the United States. And if you do know English, right? If you speak very good English,
Mm.
they put you with the white soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
But they still treat you like you were a black man. It doesn't matter if you're a white Puerto Rican.
Yeah. My gosh.
And as a as another bonus racist point for the Americans, or the Yankees we like to call them sometimes, is the last how do you say it? The last segregated military regiment in the United States, right? The very last segregated group was an all Puerto Rican group called the Borinqueneers. And they did it, and the last time they fought was in the Korean War.
Mm.
And sadly, right, many veterans, like Puerto Rican veterans, of course, especially in the 50s and 60s, were alienated of the atrocities was committed in Vietnam. Agent Orange,
Yeah.
the My Lai massacre, and other horrific
Yeah.
things that happened. So many Puerto Ricans joined communist groups.
Yeah.
They saw
Yeah.
the atrocity, and because they know they are colony as well, right? So it's
Yeah.
like one famous Puerto Rican who is also a revolutionary communist called Oscar Lopez Rivera, who went to Vietnam as a young man. He didn't know any better, you know.
Mm.
And when he saw what happened in Vietnam, especially Agent Orange, he was
Mm.
discouraged. He was like, "Why are we doing here? Why are we fighting the
Yeah.
Vietnamese? Aren't they the good
Yeah.
guys because they're fighting against colonialism? We are also in a
Mm.
colony. They're supposed to be our friends,
Exactly.
right?"
Yeah.
So he did that very few Puerto Ricans actually did was not only he decided to fall back of the discrimination against Vietnamese people and Puerto Rican people when he came back from the war. He actually made a clandestine military group against the US government. So he did, by the way, I'm not promoting this. I gotta say this in event just in case I get in trouble by the law. I do not condone this. But he was part of a group, of a communist Puerto Rican group called the FALN, right? In the former Chicago, like Chicago, United States. And he did over 200 military operations in the United States, bombing the military, bombing FBI buildings. He was doing like straight up direct action. He was doing propaganda
Wow.
of the deed in the United States during the 70s and 80s.
Mm.
And despite they arrest him, accusing him for murder, right? Even though the FBI admitted he haven't killed a single civilian, despite of the 200 bombings he did, you know,
Wow.
he was sentenced to prison. He was a political prisoner and a prisoner of war, according to the law.
Wow.
And he was there for
Wow.
35 years in prison. He has been recently left in prison thanks to the people of Puerto Rico protesting that you had to liberate every single political prisoner of the of fighting for Puerto Rican independence, right? Many people did, because, like I said, the reason many people don't know much about Puerto Rican history, not because it is like obscure, like it's not like, for example, everybody knows about the Vietnam War. You could go to a university, open a textbook, and you can read it, right? It's not gonna give you difficulty to search, right? But in Puerto Rican history, on the other hand, it's been censored because for the
Wow.
longest time, like this is way before the Americans, but even up to the 80s, like 1980s, it was illegal to publish
Wow.
anything about colonialism in Puerto Rico. You were not allowed to
Wow.
publish pro-independence,
Wow.
pro-leftist, you know, American colonization. You were not allowed. And many university professors were mysteriously, quote unquote, disappear
Wow.
between the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s.
Wow. It's crazy.
That is correct. And that's why very few Puerto Ricans know about our history, because everybody who dared to talk about it disappeared.
It disappeared.
Yeah. And even to this day, like the US government denies this ever happened.
Wow.
Like me talking about this, somebody on the internet will make a comment saying I'm being a conspiracy theorist. I'm just making shit up, right?
Wow. It's wow.
Even though it happened 30 years ago, you were probably alive when that happened.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you know?
Just 30 years ago, man.
Yeah. And there is a term in Puerto Rico that our history is like a puzzle, because we have amnesia every time we try to talk about it.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's what happened. Now, recently, however, things have changed, thankfully, right? That since 2013, this is where I noticed a pattern, right? In 2013, they started to publish these types of topics, right? That before that, it was either illegal or you were discouraged to talk about these things, right? And even if you were allowed to talk about it, it was very like, you have 1 minute, right? Don't do more than 3 pages, right? Basically, that was how it was back then. Books like these of my grandfather, you had to go clandestine. You had to go underground to buy these things or get it for free somewhere you from a friend of a friend, right? But because the FBI, there's an American law. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
There,
just fixing my.
yeah. There's an American law that is called the Freedom of Information Act. Like which after a certain time, any information that is classified and you're not supposed to know about this, it
Right.
becomes public, right? So in 2015, they did that about Puerto Rico. So
Wow.
in
Really?
2015, yeah, in 2015, it's like here you go. Everything you want to know about Puerto Rico, what the United States did to Puerto Rico from 1930 to 1990, or no, 2005. So you had this huge time period, right? Like over 70 years.
Yeah.
And that's where we discovered many things that for the longest time was considered urban legend. Like
Wow.
like there's like stories. Like I don't know in Vietnam, like you hear story from your neighbor who is like 80 years old, 90, very elderly, telling you stories about what the Americans did in this village, or the government this collaboration that nobody believes you until the documents become public decades later, you know?
Wow.
And that happened to Puerto Rico. It's been
Oh.
discovered, I'm talking about like 2020, these new papers coming out, like university trying to publish what we learned from this
Wow.
new discovery from the 1960s, right? 1960s up to the 90s, there was a death squad. There was a death squad. Its main purpose was US state-sponsored terrorism. That their main targets were Puerto Rican civilians. They attacked civilians, but they blamed the pro-independent group as the terrorists. So they
Of
used
course. Very American style.
very contra. They point the pro-independence groups, like, see, they're the bad guys. Look at how many civilian people die. You know, what bomb. And the worst part, when I say a death squad, there were two groups, two death squads, right? The one which is like the document focus more about a little bit is about FBI recruiting anti-Castro Cubans. So
Oh.
so Cubans who hate Castro, mainly white Cubans
Yes.
who were rich, went to
Yes.
Florida. They recruit them.
Miami.
Yeah, they recruit them to do state-sponsored terrorism on Puerto Ricans. So and there's a second group which I actually know the leader because he lives very close by. By the way, he's not my neighbor, but like who was the leader of another death squad run by the Puerto Rican Police Department, Comalendo.
Wow.
Like he lives like a 40-minute drive from me or something like that. I can't remember. Este, yeah, he was in prison after the incidents, right after people discovered his crimes. But he's released, right? He's out of prison, and now he's doing. I'm telling this with a serious statement. Even though he's released, now he's giving advice to the police how to solve violence.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Este, and that was last year, by the way. The interview he did, giving advice to police officers. And if you don't know about him, he is most famous for the Cerro Maravilla massacre. Like he was behind the massacre, and the
Wow.
governor at the time he passed away, and everybody was doing a party when he passed the governor in question, called Barcelo. Barcelo, for people who don't know, was the first Puerto Rican governor from the first Puerto Rican governor from the pro-statehood party. to give you a context, because before that, all previous governors were from the pro-colony party. You had the Popular, who were pro-colony, who want to keep it as it is, right? They don't want to.
Yeah.
They don't want independence, but they don't want statehood, right?
Yeah.
Here comes Barcelo, who was the first pro-statehood governor, right? He was behind most of the terrorist sponsorship on the island, and the Cerro Maravilla massacre, and he trying to cover it up, trying to prevent any information coming from the outside. Where that failed, it become basically similar to Watergate, as a comparison. Many people use it as a comparison on the island, right? Last year he passed away, and how people celebrated was basically the same how people celebrated the death of Thatcher from Britain. Everybody was having a good time. Dancing, partying, singing.
Vietnamese are still waiting for Henry Kissinger.
Oh,
I'm not gonna say the word, but we are waiting for Henry Kissinger.
I'm afraid he's a vampire at this point.
Hey, we have a saying in Vietnamese, like when an evil person they live for too long time, they're not human anymore. They turn into some kind of like monster.
I agree with you there.
Like they live too long. They become like something not human anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still waiting for Henry Kissinger as well. It's like, come on. If the dude, hurry up, pointing at the stick, like, hurry up. But yeah, I was about to continue the topic. Many Puerto Ricans recently are becoming revolutionary again, thankfully. But my fear, because I have a fear, that if we become a revolutionary again, communism is becoming a little more popular again, nationalism specifically is becoming more popular again. My fear is this going to repeat what happened before this? Like the violence the United States has respawned? Like I said, death squads, state-sponsored terrorism, massacres. Like, I'm afraid that's gotta repeat. Because we're a colony, there's no news talking about Puerto Rico, so they can do whatever they want with us, and the news will not even talk about it. They will not even acknowledge what's going on in Puerto Rico. Like I said, since 2015, nobody know anything what the United States did from 1930 to the 1990s. Nobody knew anything, right? Like, for example, my grandfather, when he was 9 years old, right? There was another thing the Americans did. It's called the Ponzi Massacre, which was another attempt by the US government to stop the left-wing nationalist movement in Puerto Rico, right? Their idea was let them protest, right? They were doing a peaceful protest, right? Let them protest. Wait till they walk up to this specific area, because there's no escape in this specific area. They're trapped in this area. So they bring the police with machine guns and start shooting everybody.
Wow.
19 people died. Over 200 were injured.
Wow.
And one of the 19 people who passed away, right? One of the 19 people, one of them was a 7-year-old girl.
Wow.
Who was shot in the back while she was running away from the police. And after the incident, because this is 1937, to give you an example. So the television wasn't introduced in Puerto Rico, right? They only have radio. So the government, because they were planning to make this massacre, they already planned this in advance. So they already took over the radio, telling the Nationalist Party is being attacking. They're using terrorist tactics. So we had to defend ourselves against these crazy commies.
Oh my gosh.
My grandpa was 9 years old when this happened. So he wasn't in the protest at the time. He was living too far away from the location. but he remembered the radio trying to justify the massacre.
Wow.
Like, he remembers that, and because of this, like I said, there's been other massacres throughout the history of Puerto Rico committed by the United States. This is not the only ones. But the Ponce is the worst one. Like, it was like the most horrific. Like but the reason the movement didn't die because of the backlash, everybody was supporting the Nationalist Party. Because people who don't know, like, if you look at the elections, the election results every year, like, we vote, right? You always see like the independence option is like the minority, but the reason for that was censorship and propaganda.
Oh.
Before the 90s, the independence option was always, without dispute, the majority position, right? But it wasn't until the 90s, because of all the propaganda, the death squads, misinformation, the Cold War, stuff like that, they convinced everybody that independence is a bad thing. It's like, why you vote independent? Like, this is the logic. I don't know if Vietnam they use the same reasoning. Like, for South Vietnam, it's like, hey, don't be like North Vietnam because they're communists. They ever use that type of tactic? Like,
yeah, they did.
So that's what happened.
60s and in the 70s, yes, they did.
Yeah, so they around the same time period, 60s, 70s, they used the same tactic. Hey, don't be independent. Don't be like Cuba. That was the reasoning. Yeah, and the reason they choose Cuba, not because it's right there, like, it's right next to us, right? But Cuba and Puerto Rico has a history of joining each other's struggle for independence. Yeah, throughout history, many Puerto Ricans went to Cuba, become generals in the Cuban army, fighting for liberation of Cuba of Spanish rule and American rule. Right, so there's many figures in Cuba. Like, if you look at Cuban if you go to a museum in Cuba, right, like, it's like, this is the General Juan Rivera, or this is, Betances, or, they're all Puerto Ricans. Many of them were Puerto Ricans, and many Cubans went to Puerto Rico for our liberation as well. That's also the reason, for people who don't know as well, right? The reason the flag of Puerto Rico, Cuba looks the same, because that was on purpose.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know about this.
Yeah, the flag, the reason they look the same, despite the reverse color, the red and blue, because they're meant to symbolize our shared struggle. And there is a famous phrase in Cuba and Puerto Rico, that how close we are as brother sister. It's like, Puerto Rico y Cuba es como dos alas del mismo pájaro, which means Puerto Rico and Cuba are just two wings of the same bird.
I see.
Yeah. And that was a term invented by a Puerto Rican, and many Cubans have used it ever since. That's why the flag looks similar, because that was on purpose. That was by design. Because there was another thing that many people don't know about, because, like I said, censorship, right? It wasn't until 2013 that people are actually starting to read the history of Puerto Rico, right? Originally, despite Puerto Rico, like, the original revolutionaries back in the 19th century, right? In Cuba, people will say Jose Martin. He was the original liberator of Cuba, right? Jose Martin. In Puerto Rico, we have Betances. Originally, the main goal was, like, they actually met each other. The main goal was, we want to liberate Cuba. We also want to liberate Puerto Rico. Okay. The goal is, we want Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic become one nation, joined together as the Confederation of the Antilles. Just like how the United States, where they have the 13 colonies, becomes the United States. That was the main goal. These 3 islands, and also Haiti, Jamaica, the Bahamas, they also joined on this program to try to establish the Confederation of the Antilles. They almost actually achieve it, The only problem was
Mm.
Puerto Rico was the last island that remained that has not yet received liberation. They were waiting
Mm.
for Puerto Rico to receive liberation before they could actually
Mm.
start the project
Oh.
of the Confederation. And what's funny is that, well, not funny, was technically sad, but like the person who came up with the idea was Betances, our hero, or our liberator, who was an anarchist.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, he was many people call him the original Che Guevara
Mm.
because he was a doctor, just like
Mm.
Che. He was a black Puerto Rican as
Oh.
well, and he actually went to the Paris Commune. He actually fought in the Paris
Mm.
Commune before, and he also
Oh,
went
I
to
see.
the French, the Spring of Nations of 1848 in France. He was also there, fighting. So he took those anarchists and like early nation ideas of liberation, took it to the Caribbean. He actually went to Cuba to help liberate Cuba. He actually went to the Dominican Republic to overthrow a dictator, and he actually achieved that. And the people of the Dominican Republic were so impressed that thank you
Mm.
Petance to save us from our dictatorship, right? Do you want to be our president? They actually offered him as a
Mm.
president, but he
Mm.
said
Mm.
no.
Mm.
He declined.
Mm.
He's like, no,
Wow.
no. My goal is to liberate the Caribbean.
Mm.
Not be a president.
Mm.
But like I said, he was an anarchist
Wow.
as well. He denied any centralized, power
Yeah.
status. He also helped in Haiti. There was an epidemic of cholera. I can't pronounce that word. Epidemic, and he actually helped fix the epidemic. He actually built the biggest hospital in Haiti at the time. And when he actually tried to liberate Puerto Rico, the reason he didn't achieve his goal compared what he did to the other islands, because somebody snitched on him.
Oh gosh.
That's what happened. It's a revolution. It happened 1868, called the Cry of Lares. I'm trying to translate English, but like it's called the Cry of Lares, right? Every September 23rd, we celebrate the Day of Lares. And actually, that holiday is technically illegal. We're not supposed to celebrate that. If you actually celebrate the Lares in the town that it takes place, there's a good likelihood you're gonna get arrested for doing that.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah. And my great grandpa, like I said, doesn't care about the American government. Just fuck you. I'm still gonna sing the national anthem. I gotta bring the Puerto Rican flag of the Day of Lares, and nobody's gonna stop me. Maybe a gun, but
Wow.
nobody's gonna stop me.
Wow. Wow.
That
True
was
hero.
he was a hero. And because of this, thanks to Pedances, every island of the Caribbean knows who he is. Every island except Puerto Rico. That's another problem. Like, if you go to Cuba, right, and you ask a Cuban, who is Pedances, they will tell you his entire life story. It's like, oh, he met Jose Martin. He was his hero, his inspiration. He helped us liberate from the Spanish, dictators. And if you go to the Dominican Republic, you ask them, who is Betances, right? It's like, oh, he was a half Dominican, half Puerto Rican. He help us overthrow a dictator. He was friends to our hero Gregory Luperon. He actually convinced the United States to not annex Dominican Republic.
Wow.
He managed to convince the United States to not do colonialism on the island.
Wow.
I don't know how he managed to do that. I'm still scratching my head about that part. If you go to Haiti, even though everybody speaks French in Haiti, like if you ask them who is Betances, they have folklore about him. Like there's
Wow.
stories of him performing miracles. It's like
Wow.
like she like there was a blind woman and he touched her eye and she can see again. Like there's folklore about him. Yeah.
Wow.
But if you go to Puerto Rico, who's Betances? I don't know. Nobody. And like I remember somebody did an interview to a random civilian, right? Like, who is Petance? I don't know. While the statue was right behind her. Like, she
Wow.
didn't know the statue was him, like he was referred to. It's like that guy behind you. It's like, oh, what did he do?
Oh my gosh.
But they, but if you ask them about this American president, oh, we know about that. Yeah, we know who's George Washington. We know who's Thomas Jefferson. You know who you know, George Bush. But we don't nobody like George Bush. We remember him because we hate him. Este, but if you ask our heroes, like in Vietnam, like they teach your heroes, like your liberators, like Ho Chi Minh and other similar.
Absolutely. We have to learn by heart. So many of them literally learn by heart.
Yeah,
All the stories, and we study those stories since like kindergarten. Like we study poem about Lenin and stories of like Marx and Ho Chi Minh. Literally since like 6 years old. So, and the thing is that like I see the parallel here because when Vietnam was under the French colonialism for 100 years, they did the same thing. That they tried to erase our history and our culture, and try to force Vietnamese to be illiterate. And that was why when Ho Chi Minh and other communists tried to persuade Vietnamese people to stand up and fight for our liberation, the
yeah,
first one of the very first thing that the Vietnamese communist group did was to teach Vietnamese people about our own history again. And one of the most famous poems of Ho Chi Minh was he wrote that like dân ta phải viết sử ta cho tường gốc đất nước nhà Việt Nam. It means that like our people have to know about our own nation so we can know clearly about our own history. That is really the kind of poem that like every single Vietnamese learn and know about it, and that is why Vietnamese have been focusing so much, especially since the 50s, since the North gained our independence and for fighting for the South. We started like tracing back and learn all of the history and the culture and the heroes in the ancient time of Vietnam even to this day, and try to develop our culture in a new era.
yeah. And it's the complete opposite in Puerto Rico. You are discouraged. You are discouraged to talk about your heroes. And I remember when I talked to my grandpa, it's like, hey, I found this book from like the one I show you. I found this book from my great grandpa, about Pedro Abisu Campo. He stopped me right there. Hey, don't talk about that. There may be police here. Like,
Wow. Jeez.
like he stopped me out of fear that something bad is going to happen to me if I spoke too much. You
Oh
know,
my gosh.
my grandmother, she warned me because she noticed I was being a little too radical, right?
Mm.
Well, I can't blame her because she's also a leftist,
Mm-hmm.
but she warned me like, please stop it. I don't want you to suffer the same fate as my father. You know, like she already suffered enough. What they did to his father.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to repeat. His grandson repeat the same mistakes. You know,
Crazy.
and so that you are very discouraged. Like for example, if you go to Puerto Rico, right? You're not allowed. Like everybody knows who's are the American presidents, and if you ask a Puerto Rican, like a Puerto Rican, right? Like a politician, right? They always gotta talk about the pro-colony or pro-statehood politicians. But never, 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 they gotta talk about the independent revolutionaries. You know, nobody knows who is Ramon Betances, right? The original Che Guevara. Nobody knows who is Pedro Abisu Campos. That man in particular, right? He is so respected, right? But in the same time, everybody's scared to mention him because
Oh.
they know what happens if you become pro Albizu,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because he, like, I can put links and when I try to upload this on YouTube, the pre-recorded version of it, I will put links in the description. About there's actually audio recordings of him, of Pedro doing his speeches. Sadly, because it's in Spanish, there's no English subtitles. Although there are people who actually translate English in book form, so I will try my best how I could put that in the description, but like that's gonna take a while.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome.
He was so respected that many Puerto Rican historians would tell you, when it comes to revolutionary history, right? There's pre-Albizu and there's post-Albizu. That's how important he is. He is the catalyst of our history of struggle for colonialism, because like I said, he was also a black Puerto Rican as well. And he was the first Puerto Rican to graduate from Harvard University as well. He was the first Puerto Rican to do that. But he faced discrimination to such a degree, right, that they didn't allow him to have his diploma for 2 years. They refused to give him his degree for 2 years. And they didn't allow him to do when you graduate from university, you had to do a speech. They didn't allow him. They sent him to the military while he was supposed to do the ceremony. They made him fight in World War One, hoping he could die over there.
Jeez.
When he came back from the war, right? He actually went to Ireland, and he actually joined the pro-independent Ireland faction. He's actually one of the main contributors of the Irish independence article in Constitution. He actually is one of the founders of that. When he came back with this realization, right, like we need socialism, we need independence, right? We have to fight against the colonialists and the imperialists of the Yankee Empire, we like to call it, And like I said, my great grandfather was a member of his group. He actually met him multiple occasions. They were actually friends. And according to my grandmother, they met him on multiple occasions, right? But one day, Pedro had enough, because originally his goal was election, like vote for me. He thought if you could vote, like the Bernie Sanders type of people, if you could vote somebody. He originally tried to do that, but he realized, wait a minute, this is capitalist, this is not gonna work. So he decided, no, let's be militant. We had to revive, in his words, when he did his final speech, right? This is his last major speech before he did a revolution. A month before that, and he was saying, ¿Dónde está el espíritu de Betances? Which is, where's the spirit of Betances? Where are the sons and daughters of Betances? Where's the cry of Lares once again? He was advocating for a violent revolution, right? That we need to overthrow the Puerto Rican government. We need to overthrow the Yankee Empire. We need to overthrow everybody. We have to liberate ourselves from military struggle, right? And this is 1950. So in 1950, my great grandpa did not participate. Like he chose not to participate out of fear of the FBI. Wow. Right? Because he know that if the FBI found out he participated in the revolution of 1950, he will be dead on the spot. They will not hesitate to kill him, right? And he didn't want that. He had a daughter, which was my grandmother, right? And she wasn't even born yet, So it's like he was scared that no, I want to see my child grow up, right? So I know, I'm not gonna risk, personally, I will not risk it, right? Out of respect, when the revolution happened, the United States do what they do best, is become fascist. And what happened was, when we did the revolution, 1950, we also tried to kill the president in the same time. President Truman, Harry S. Truman, was the president at the time when the revolution happened. And he went on the radio, I'm not making this up, by the way. he called. He said we had to stop these evil fascist communists. He called us communists and fascists in the same sentence. You know, that's how incoherent he was. You know, when that failed, because we actually failed the assassination attempt. Right. By the way, Twitch, I am not condoning terrorism. You know, I want to say this in advance just in case if this video gets blocked somehow, because my old channel got deleted, so I don't want that again. The revolution was a failure. Sadly, it was a failure, and the reason, because it happened like last time. Somebody snitched. Again, somebody talked to the police, telling them, "Hey, tomorrow there's going to be a revolution." You know, so the U.S. National Guard was prepared to fight back. You know, it happened all over the island. You know, it happened all over the place. There were 150 militant revolutionary communists, right, fighting 5,000 National Guard and police officers. You know, the revolution lasted for 10 days, to give you an example. And the reason nobody talks about this revolution, because of the censorship, many things happen in this revolution that America to this day deny it happened. Like, it pretend these specific crimes we did not commit, right? The example I want to give is they bombed Puerto Rico. That's another thing. They sent the U.S. Air Force to bomb Puerto Rico. So they bombed Jayuya and Utuado, which is like the mountain regions of the island, right? That was considered our best location to fight, because if you don't know the mountain, you cannot reach us, right? But no, they decided to bring military airplanes with machine guns and everything to bomb these two places. And it's unknown how many civilians died in this bombing.
Wow.
And one of the revolutionaries who is still alive, he's 95 years old. It's called Ramon Diaz. He still remember what happened when they bombed Jayuya and Utuado. He was because he was in the military as well. He was in the army, right? And he remembered that when the planes came in, right? Like, he already know the noise of the airplanes. Like, wait a minute, stop! I hear airplanes, right? And when they look at the sky, they notice they have machine guns. So they were shooting at the ground randomly. They didn't care if there were civilians or anything. They're just shooting and bombing the whole place. You know? And because of this, because there was in Jayuya in particular, we actually successfully took over Jayuya, right? For 3 days. The more amazing part is the person who took over Jayuya was a grandma. Somebody's grandma. She only had an assault rifle, 4 other people, and they took over the entire county.
Wow.
And she actually
That's amazing.
And she actually fought the National Guard almost by herself for 3 days. And it wasn't until the Air Force bombed the place. And she didn't even die, by the way. She survived the bombing.
Wow.
You know, they arrest her. She's called Blanca Canales. You know, everybody's favorite grandmother in that area. And another example is in Utuado, because that's the other place they bomb as well. When the National Guard took over a specific area, Utuado, they found the nationalist communists, right? There was the Communist Party of Puerto Rico and there was the Nationalist Party, but they were basically the same, because they were like in the same members, like they go back and forth. When they found out you're surrounded, right? You know, gave up your weapons, right? So they did. Like the National Guard, okay, we gave up, you're surrounded, we gotta lay down our weapons. And like I said, to this day, they still deny They still deny that this ever happened. They went to the police department, right? Okay, stand over there, okay? Massacre the entire group. It's called the Otuado Massacre. And many civilians were there watching the massacre. One woman, we don't know who she is sadly, but one woman was screaming, asesinos, which is basically saying murderer or assassin, right? And one of the National Guard had a machine gun. They point at the civilian woman, shoot her above the head, and say, oh, go back inside, you had nothing to do with this, or we kill you. You know. They were threatening to kill civilians if they dared to speak out. You know, and many things happened throughout the island. The, before we go to a different topic, two other events happened in the revolution. Another one, who is by Adeso, who is a barber, right? He actually went. I don't think I should compare this, but you ever watch the movie Rambo? Do you ever watch that movie?
The Rambo, oh, yeah, yes, I did.
Okay.
Rambo, yeah, I was like thinking so hard about that movie. Yes.
So imagine that, but instead of an American fighting Vietnamese or whatever Southeast Asian country, I can't remember where it takes place. Imagine a Puerto Rican fighting imperialists. Imagine that. So imagine this scenario, because we actually have recording, like how do you call this, a radio, right? The first ever live radio transmission, like we're live, right? You know, it's like on radio was this gunfight. You know, we still have it. You can go to YouTube and you can listen to the audio. It's still there. It's like, imagine this: one barber, right? Just one guy fighting 20 heavily armed soldiers by himself for 3 hours. And he almost won. That's the crazy part. Like, he almost won the fight, you know, because there was a building that he owned, like that was his barbershop, right? And he had a secret room in his barbershop. So every time the military comes in, he disappears. And he just pop in a random door out of nowhere, just pops. It's like surprise, and starts shooting the imperialists. You know, and it took for 3 hours. And the military, they thought that like there has to be like an entire army inside that building. How they keep fighting? You know, until sadly, they finally got him. They shot him point blank in the head, right? They shot him in the head. They threw a grenade. A staircase fell on top of him, right? But the crazy part, despite, you know, being shot at point blank, you know, in the head, they took a corpse, right? They wanted to take a picture, like they hunt a deer, like they were trying to use that comparison, like look at the animal I caught, right? But they noticed he was still alive. Like he was still alive, and but they got so scared of this man. There's like, no, take it to the hospital. He's your problem. We don't want to deal with him ever again. You know, and he survived. He lived from like the age of 80 something. Yeah.
Wow.
Like he lived from the age of 80 something. I can't remember the exact age, but it's like in his 80s, right? And they did an interview. Do you ever regret that you fought in the revolution? No, I do not. Sometimes I get a headache, but no, I don't longer. I never regret that I participated in the revolution. I just love that quote from him. It's like, the bullets sometimes give me a headache, but like, you know, everything's fine. Oh man. But after the revolution,
that's crazy story.
Yeah, that is the most crazy. I love that, man. But like I said, my great grandpa, during the revolution, he was a prison guard. But like I said, nobody at the time where he worked, nobody know he was a communist. You know, he was, you know, in secret, right? But they found out because he was being a little too nice to the revolutionaries they caught. You know, you go to prison, we gotta kill you in the prison, or we gotta beat you up, right? And he was the only person defending them. He was the only person, like, leave them alone, hey, don't do that. And they were like suspicious, like, why you be so nice to
Yeah, I
the,
see.
you know being so nice to them, right? It's even worse because they put him in charge. I don't know if your family member ever met a famous revolutionary Vietnamese person, but like my great grandpa met Albizu, the leader of the party, right, the leader of the revolution. He was in charge to be his prison guard. Like, it's like, hey, you have to be careful. We gotta put you in charge. You gotta pay attention to Pedro himself. Be careful with that man. Little do they know he's part of the same group. And I remember my grandma told me every time he go to work, the prison guard would like, be careful, that man's dangerous, stuff like that.
Mm.
He just gave him a coffee. It's like, what's the next plan?
Mm.
Like, well, that didn't work. What's the next plan? They were having conversations and stuff like that. He actually tried to defend him on court. Like, he actually went to court for his release. That's where the FBI almost tried to kill him.
Wow.
Sadly, they never killed him, thankfully. But
Mm.
I remember this because my grandma always tell me this story. When he had a how do you call it, a stroke?
Stroke?
Uh-huh. Yeah. And when he had that, he survived, thankfully. But when he had that, they went to the hospital, right, to recover.
Mm.
The FBI went to his room
Mm.
when he was in the hospital bed. Like, everybody left. Like, the hospital,
Mm.
the doctor, the nurse, everybody left. And he was alone with the FBI agent.
Mm.
There were two FBI agents, according to my grandma.
Mm.
And they talked to him.
Mm.
It's like, and they were telling him, hey, do you know that you never received that promotion from the
Mm.
as a prison guard? Do you know why? It's like, because we're the reason you never had that promotion. You could easily become a captain or the general of the prison, but we didn't allow you to do that.
Mm.
But they kind of feel bad for some reason. It's like, yes, for the past 7 years, we basically ruined your life financially, but no harm feelings, right? Yes. I'm not making this sound like they trying to make peace with my great grandpa despite admitting they ruined his life financially. Why he was struggling so hard, why he can never have a good promotion, why he can never have a good job, why his friends were murdered and disappeared. Like, they admitted in front of his face, right? And they were like, look, I feel bad because you have a stroke, so do you want that promotion? Like, they said that. And my grandpa, as persistent as he is, he told them to the FBI, like, he was in the bed, hospital bed, he couldn't live. Yeah, he couldn't, like, sit up. And he just told it, they look at his face. It's like, you could take that promotion. You could shove it up your ass.
Awesome.
And the FBI agent was pissed. He left. I think he's the only person I ever know who can tell the U.S. government to fuck off and got away with it. you know,
Badass.
that's like, rest in peace, great grandpa. But like, oh, but yeah, it's like many things like that because, like you say in Vietnam, you love your history so much. You learn from the heart of your people, your heroes, like from the revolution in Vietnam from the 1670s and even before that, like historical figures that contribute to the identity of Vietnam. Puerto Rico, we don't know nothing about our history. The reason I know about this because my grandma is a revolutionary. The reason I know because she tells me because her father was a revolutionary, right? And now it's only till 5 years ago when they finally published books, documentaries, and other things to actually teach us what actually happened. Because I remember when I was 8 years old, there was another revolution again. Another person you're not allowed to mention. Like I said, you have Betances, you have Albizu. This time we have Filiberto. He was a leader of a military separatist Maoist group, called the Macheteros, or the machete wielders in English. And he went to war with the United States. In Ireland, there is a thing called the Troubles. Yeah, you ever heard that?
Troubles? I don't. Yeah, I never heard of that.
So it's like the same thing. They went to a clandestine war against the United States for 30 years for Puerto Rico independence, right? And many people supported the group, right? And Filiberto, he did things that nobody else has done in the history of the United States. Like, for example, he did the biggest attack against the US Air Force in American history. There's no other person who did more damage than him. Like, he blew up entire Air Force field by himself.
Wow.
Just a group of free people. You know, he actually managed to kick out the Navy base in Vieques, which is, if you don't know, in Vieques, Puerto Rico, it was the largest naval base in the world outside of the United States. And we kicked them out. All thanks to him. And he attacked the FBI, the US government, and when he actually got caught, they actually arrest him, right? They went to the Supreme Court. The FBI, they just assume, they gotta put in the death penalty. He's gotta be labeled as a terrorist, stuff like that. But they did an analysis, and Filiberto defended the case. Hey, this is a colony. We had the right to self-determination by armed struggle. Because according to the United Nations, if you are in a colony, you have the right to use military action against your imperial aggressors, right? And he won the case. He defeated the US Supreme Court. And the FBI were mad. They tried to kill him multiple occasions. Until when I was 7 years old, they actually managed to kill him. To this day, we don't know much about the details why. But we do know it's about this. I was 7 years old, so it's like 200 FBI agents. 200 to kill one man. Right?
Wow.
They cut off electricity. So he didn't have no telephone communication, nothing. Right? He had no communication out the outside. They also cut off his communication wires. Just in case if there's any other method he used, he had no communication. They cut off both of them. There was a school very close to where he lived, and they talked to the school principal, do not go to school tomorrow. Nobody's going to work tomorrow. So he was alone. No communication, no people. He was by himself. Right? So 200 FBI agents came him to kill him. But he fought hard until sadly he died. But the reason he couldn't survive, because he died by bleeding to death. And they have medical equipment. They refused to give him any treatment. They let him die bleeding. And he was 72 years old when they murdered him. He was an elderly man. And when the FBI announced on public television, when they announced the terrorist Filiberto finally died, they just assumed that the Puerto Rican people will be celebrating his death. For some reason, they just assumed that's gonna happen. Of course they didn't. Of course they did not. 500,000 people went to his funeral. That's one of the largest funerals in the history of the island. There's never been a funeral that big for one person, right? And of course, they burned the American flag. They took the American flag, burned it to the ground, and raised the Puerto Rican flag. And they also raised the Cuban flag as well, to give you a statement, right? And the American flag. You could go to Google, right? Machetero photos, right? That you can see images of the funeral. Many people took the American flag, right? went to the FBI building and spray painted the flag called FBI Asesino or FBI Assassins. And they just pointed at the FBI building. You know, you think we're stupid, like, you know. And sadly, like, you could go on YouTube, but you can find his last speech, his last recorded words, hours before he was murdered. Like, hours before he was murdered, he did one last speech because it happened on the day of Lares. Because they purposely killed him on the day of the celebration of our first revolution. That was on purpose, the date. And I could put the link in the description as well, just for, if people are interested, right? There's an audio recording of him hours before he was murdered. And like I said, it was almost prophetic what Puerto Rico was going to happen for the next 20 years after he died. Like, he was like almost saw the future because he predicted everything. Privatization, factionalism, electoralism, reformists, politicians who don't care about the people. American doesn't care about our well-being after the hurricane and the storm, like the earthquakes and the bankruptcy. Like, he was ahead of time before everybody else, right? And like I said, there's a lot of things about Puerto Rican history that people don't know because, like I said, it was censored. You were discouraged for the longest time. You were discouraged, and if you were a professor, you die. You die if you dare to speak out, right? That's why there's been so many massacres, so many assassinations, many attempted assassinations, right? It's only till now that people, realize that, wait a minute, this is a colony, right? America's an empire. Well, everybody know that already, but like they were like more aware. Like, if the America's an empire, we're a colony, we had to do something, right? But sadly, unlike Vietnam, when you had the people ready to fight for your liberation, right, you have this class consciousness, about military struggle, armed struggle for liberation. We still haven't reached that point. I would like to reach that point, but like, people are not, they're not there yet, right?
Yeah. Class consciousness.
Yeah. Any thoughts when I rant for like a good hour about the people?
I need to go in 10 minutes, but
that's okay.
It's really great to hear about an attempt of revolution on the other side of the earth, of the direct like colony of the U.S.
Yeah.
And with the shit is going on in the world right now too, I do hope that leftism, communism, Marxism will keep like rising up in Puerto Rico, and I hope that more and more Puerto Rican comrades will learn more about the history and their solidarity from Vietnam to Puerto Rico, and hope that one day you can really be independent and have self-determination. I mean, it's just, we all share the same struggle, and the empire is crumbling right now. It's collapsing right now. Yeah, hopefully, and hope that we can see the collapse of the empire in our lifetime, and have a better world for ourselves. I mean, what do you think about the future of leftism in Puerto Rico?
At the moment, because like I said, it's like it wasn't until 2020, right? Leftism is on the rise again, right? Like, when I mean leftism, I'm not talking about like in Vietnam where you have Marxism and Leninism, right? Or in Chiapas, Mexico, where you have anarchism, right? It is leftism, but in a very electoral, reformist sense. Like, we're socialists.
Like liberal.
Yeah, like, we're socialists. Like, we believe that the people own the means of production, but they still believe in the same time, like, vote for me somehow. Because right now, because I'm starting to sound like silver spook because I'm chewing too much rant, but like there are 6 people in Congress who are socialists, like self-declared socialists. We believe in Marxism, you know, and right now many people, like I said, because they're being reintroduced to our history, so many people are becoming more militant. Feminism is becoming popular again, thankfully, because violence against women sadly is common. It's a sad fact in the daily life in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
And many women are protesting, and many Puerto Rican women, like a couple months ago, went to este, the capital, not the United States capital, the Puerto Rican capital, right? Many women dress as Lolita Lebron, and in context, if you don't know who she is, she was a Puerto Rican nationalist of the same Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico of Pedro Albizu Campos. She actually attacked the U.S. Capitol before Trump made it cool. She attacked the Capitol in 1954. And unlike the Trump fans, who were basically a bunch of idiots who didn't know how to open a door, it was her, Rafael, and 2 other people. I can't remember their names, sadly. Just 4 people, a bunch of guns. They got in the Capitol and start shooting the imperialists.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. Rest in peace, Lolita. And the reason I say this, because when I saw that image of Puerto Rican women, 2021, 2022, going to the Congress, going to the Capitol, dressed as her, holding a fake gun, right? Because she used a gun to attack the Capitol for Puerto Rican independence. That's never been done before. Nobody has dressed as a famous revolutionary nationalist protesting for women's rights, using, of all people, the woman who attacked the U.S. Capitol. That's never been done before. That is something like leftists on the right, and it's been confirmed by the U.S. government, by the way, that in the 2020 election, they did a survey like 2 months before the elections. They did a survey: do you want Puerto Rico to become independent, statehood, or keep its economy? Like they did a census. 41%, that was like the dominant position, 41% said independence. For the first time in 70 years, the dominant option was independence. But, like colonialism, when the elections actually came, they removed the independence option from the elections for the first time in history. So it shows you, like, they were aware, the leftism on the rise. Yeah, I can see there's a good future for, like, popularity in leftism again. Like I said earlier, I have a little fear because how they respond the last time they did, like massacres, death squads, bombing, human experimentation. By the way, they also did that. The eugenics. My grandma was a victim of human experimentation. Of forced sterilization. Like, she was a victim of forced sterilization against her consent, because it was a eugenics program. Because they didn't they make an assumption there's too many Puerto Ricans, so we had to stop them from reproducing. So we gotta cut the uterus without their consent. To stop the Puerto Rican gene. They did genocide. And my grandma was sadly a victim of it because she wanted to have another kid, right? But after the operation, they told her you can't have babies anymore. Why? Why do you say that? Because you can. So she did an investigation. Because she's a leftist, so she talked to other Puerto Ricans like, hey, the doctor told me this and that. She was part of a eugenics program. They removed her ability to reproduce against her will.
Jeez.
Yeah. And of course, furious, like, she was ready to basically murder the doctor. You know,
Ah,
but she didn't. But she was depressed. You know, like she
of
couldn't.
course, yeah.
She, like she wanted to have more children, but sadly, the American Empire took her away that autonomy completely. And like I said, like it's like the American Empire. There's so many horrible things. Like I said, human experimentation was sadly common against Puerto Ricans. It was a very common, and there is a recent study that 41% of the the Puerto Rican population was first forced sterilized. 41% of the population. If people who don't know that percentage, right, of genocide, right, of sterilized the Puerto Ricans was higher than Nazi Germany. That is higher than Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany was 35%. Puerto Rico was 41. And to this day, they still deny that ever happened as well. They still pretend. They still pretend that 1/3 of the female population was forced sterilized.
Gosh.
But yeah, that I can go on for hours, but I think we can stop here. Like I said, like a Puerto Rican history is depressing. So that's the summary I'm trying to give. It's the and
It's sad.
like I
I
said,
don't know, man.
I just want to spread awareness of our history and the struggle that we are
That's
going
very
through
important.
it. I want to share this content like I did with my old channel before it got deleted, right? And I want people, Luna, EJ, Silver Spook, spread content like mine about this specific topic that sadly nobody knows about, not even my own people.
Yeah.
You know, the reason,
Sucks a lot.
yeah, like I said, the reason I know this because my grandma, you know, it's only till recently they bother to publish anything about the topic, right? And sadly, because capitalism, if you want to watch documentaries about this similar topic, you have to go on Amazon Prime
Yeah.
because of course,
They would never allow this kind of topic to
no,
be talked about.
no, never. That's why my channel got
Yeah.
deleted. I did 90 videos of this specific topic, and all of them got copyright strike. They all got banned in India for some reason. Don't ask me why. I'm still struggling, scratching my head why South Asia is banned, but but yeah, it happens. That, that's all I had to say. I just want to bring solidarity, and also to people around the world to share our struggle. Like happy Vietnam for your liberation, happy to Cuba for their liberation. Happy to other Latin American countries like Bolivia, Venezuela, Peru.
Yeah.
Chiapas, Mexico, Chile, Honduras, Nicaragua, all these places in Latin America as well. And also people who are like us Puerto Ricans, who are other people suffering the same fate and still struggling for their independence, like Okinawa, against Japan. You have Northern Ireland, you have Kurdistan, Tommy Elema, stuff like that. That's why I'm trying to bring a message right here, right? Very solidarity. I think that's all I have to say for now. And do you have any other thoughts or questions that you want to clarify?
Um, I hope that we can, do some more in the future
Yeah,
raise awareness about this issue. So sadly that I have to leave right now because I'm finishing my book. Hopefully that it can be released within this week. I'm finishing some last like steps of the book. So
yeah,
hope that book can help people to learn about Marxism, radical materialism, and will bring back the revolutionary spirit of
yeah,
people, especially people in the global south, non-white people, and people in like being occupied by the U.S., like Puerto Rico, like Hawaii, like Guam, and other many places. So it's very nice to be here, to talk to you, and definitely I hope in the future we can do more collaboration or do more stream together like this.
yeah. Yeah, you can DM me like anytime when you think it's appropriate. We can do another collaboration. Este, by the way, can't wait for the book. I'm patiently waiting.
Oh, I'm trying so hard to finish it. There's so many things to do.
Don't worry about it, because if I ever publish a book, I just put it on PDF and on the anarchist library. It's like, there you go. Please don't talk to me. It's like, there's a typo, you can fix it. It's open software. You know, that would be me, honestly. It's like, here, done. Please leave me alone. You know.
It's so nice to talk to you. Bye bye. See you next time.
Bye. Have a wonderful day.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.